It all starts with Shakyamuni Buddha, who we think lived about 2,700 years ago. He was a prince, he was very wealthy, and his family protected him from any knowledge at all of birth, aging, sickness, or death. And it was in sneaking out of the castle walls, basically, into the outside world, that those things were confronted and greatly shocked and confused him. So he set out into the world, left his family behind, and for those that think that that's harsh or irresponsible, these were the wealthiest people in the land that he left behind with all their wealth. So maybe not so much. He's setting out to find a way to relieve all people of suffering. He made a vow in his heart that he was going to save everybody from these sufferings. Anyway, he fell in with some ascetics, and they were into denying themselves all pleasures and all wants, and eventually all needs, and eventually bathing and shelter and food and water, and he really was close to death when his meditation revealed to him that this was no better than ignoring the truth and being ignorant and living in the lap of luxury. Destroying yourself is no better. So he began to teach the middle way, and he fell out of his ascetic group, and they called him a failure, and he said the extremes are unacceptable, bring it into the center, and everything extreme is going to swing you the other way. The only thing that you can maintain is the middle way. Anyway, he taught apparently for decades, long time. He apparently lived a long time. And that's probably why there are so many different sects of Buddhism, is how long he taught. Anyway, his crowning achievement, his grand teaching, the Lotus Sutra, would come towards the end of his life. And among other things, it called for his disciples to disregard all of his previous teachings. Those were just provisional. Those weren't the truth. The Lotus Sutra is the truth. And a lot of his followers had a tough time changing their ways, changing their concepts. Other things that the Lotus Sutra expounded was a description of the mystic law of cause and effect, the eternity of life, and how the Buddha nature is inherent in all people, including women even. And other things were in there as well, such as the 10 worlds and the 3,000 realms, but I'll get into that later. Essentially, this document says, you are a Buddha, I am a Buddha, we are all Buddhas. And one gets immeasurable benefit and gain in their life when you uphold the mystic law of cause and effect and the truth about the Buddha nature in others. And the last part is he reveals, I didn't get enlightenment under the Bodhi tree where I realized the middle way. No. That was just how it seems. The real truth is that I got enlightenment an incalculable number of epochs and eons ago in the distant, remote past. Again, sort of harping on this eternity of life deal. Okay, so eventually, Buddhism falls to the hands of his followers and becomes different sort of sects of Buddhism. And eventually those end up, you know, in the form of temples with priests and high priests, and not all the high priests are all that terribly wise, and it just falls into ritual. So in the 1200s in Japan, this would be a feudal society, feudal Japan, and there was a young boy of 12 years old who was born without means, poor. I think his parents were seaweed farmers. And his name was Zenichimaru. And he comes along and decides he wants to pursue an education. And the only way to do that is to join a temple. And become a Buddhist monk. So he quickly realized that Buddhism wasn't helping people like it was supposed to. It was supposed to help all people become profoundly, deeply happy. And it was helping nobody. Only the rich could afford the right rituals to, you know, bury their dead the right way and hope to become enlightened in the distant future. Well, Zenichimaru made a vow in his heart to become the wisest man in Japan. What strikes me is how tiny are my prayers. Like, wow, that impresses me, okay? Anyway, he ended up visiting every temple, every sect of Buddhism that he could, and everywhere that there were these scriptures of the Buddha's teachings, and studied voraciously throughout his life. And eventually, he encountered a sage, a wise man, who had come hundreds of years earlier, but his teaching was recorded, and his name was Tiantai. Tiantai was Chinese, and he studied voraciously the Buddha's teachings and said, you know what, it's correct to consider them chronological, because the Buddha's enlightenment was rising throughout his teachings, and his crowning achievement being the Lotus Sutra, and the depth of that teaching being the utmost. So the Lotus Sutra is it.